Well, hello everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. I know this has been an information-packed couple of days, so I'm going to really be talking about content, not specifically about products, but I'm going to be giving you kind of some insight into ways that you can bring smart strategy to your content marketing. Most of us who are marketers feel much more comfortable talking about product. It's more concrete. It's easier to measure your ROI, and so then you can go to your bosses and justify what you've been doing. Content marketing is a little trickier, though. So we'll kind of dive into some of the techniques that I use when I create content marketing. But just so that we're all starting from the same place, let's just start with a definition of content marketing. So online materials, blogs, videos, social media posts that do not explicitly promote a brand, but it's intended to stimulate interest in products or services. And this is very distinct from what you do with product marketing, of course. A lot of people do this because they want to drive SEO. That's a really big benefit to this. Google AdWords are expensive. Creating content is expensive. Both of these are different ways to apply your resources to your marketing efforts. So one of the really typical ways that we do content marketing, people love listicles, right? I mean, they work really well. So if you go on to Google right now and you type in tips for content marketing, you get a really great post. It goes into 4 key things that you can do to really improve your content marketing efforts. And so oftentimes we emulate that when we sit down with our own brands and our own industries so that we can capture some of this organic interest. Here's the problem. There's a lot of content marketing going on out there. There are a lot of people who are creating listicles who are competing with you for the attention of your potential viewers. So one of the things that we have to be trying to figure out is how do you compete against it? Do you just keep going to higher and higher numbers? Do you throw in different adjectives? These are like problems that we face, but I think that if you take a step back and stop looking at things just on a post-by-post basis and stop looking at it as a question of, well, how many views am I going to get on this particular article, you can start to see there are other strategies involved. But it's important when you're getting started on anything like this to make sure you've got a really clear understanding of your objectives here. So the number one objective, or one of the objectives for content marketing, is customer education. Of course, you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to initiate a relationship with a user by educating them, by giving them some important information that'll help them do whatever it is that they're trying to do better. Also, customer engagement. You're creating content. You want people to come into your comments section on your blog. You want people to share it on social media. You want people to talk about what you've done. And so you'll be promoting it on social media. You'll be replying in comments, just so that you can get that rapport going. Because the more you build an emotional relationship with your customers, the more they're going to think of you when they go in the market to find a solution. Another thing for content marketing is its brand recognition, right? I mean, it's expensive. You can go put a billboard up on on 35 out here, or you can do more direct outreach, so that people, when they're thinking through the options in the market, your brand comes to mind. It's also brand loyalty. Again, a lot of what we do as marketers is we try to stimulate emotional reactions to our brands. That's going to be one of your biggest selling tools, is if you make people feel, oh wow, Zoho solved one of my big problems, and as a result of that, I have a positive emotional reaction to them. That's going to help you stand out in the marketplace. The other thing is repeat traffic. You've got a product website where you're putting up new offerings every once in a while. You can send out email campaigns, you can promote things on Google AdWords, but if you are viewed as a source for valuable content that is educational, not just something that people are going to be, that people know they're going to be sold with, then people come back, and when they come back, you'll have more opportunities to push them into your sales funnel. That's the big point of what we're all doing, right? I mean, as marketers, it's important to keep that ultimate goal in mind, which is you're trying to get conversions, you're trying to generate leads so that you can hand over those names and emails to your sales team. Keeping all of these things in mind is really important as you're stepping into this content game, because it's really easy to get focused on SEO or to get focused on how many clicks, how many views, and that's all incredibly important. But the thing with content marketing is that it's also about this longer term relationship that's really hard to quantify. And they say you encourage what you measure. Well, content marketing is really hard to measure, at least to measure those core benefits. So we kind of choose things that are peripheral to that. The core benefit is brand loyalty. But brand loyalty is hard to measure. So instead, you have to kind of keep all of these in mind when you sit down to do content marketing, because otherwise you're just going to be kind of endlessly running up the SEO hill. And though that's still important, there's another layer of strategy that can also help with that. So speaking of strategy, let's take a look at some of the typical ways that people employ content marketing in their businesses. So strategy number one, I'm sure it's something that you've all heard of and thought about. Publish 2 blog posts a week on topics relevant to your industry. This is great. This drives traffic to your website. It increases your rankings on Google. And what you're hoping for, your dream, is you publish regularly. People comment, your audience grows, organic traffic increases, visitors share your posts on social media, you become an authority in your field, sales go through the roof, and you retire happy and rich. Unfortunately, that's not always what happens. Sometimes you publish a couple good posts, but no one comments, no one shares. You keep writing, but you aren't seeing returns, so you decide to post once a week, which becomes once a month, sometimes less than that. There's a trickle of visitors, but otherwise your blog is a ghost town. On cold, dark nights, you shed a tear for all the time you've wasted. Now, hopefully nobody was like, oh my God, that's exactly me. But we've all had that, where you've slaved over a piece and then it goes up and it just doesn't do what you were hoping it was going to do. And so we go and we cry. Another strategy is you write an ebook about a topic that is relevant to your industry to drive lead generation. And we've all tried that gating technique. And what you're hoping for is that you gate your ebook behind a subscribe button. Visitors are intrigued. They sign up for your newsletter. Your subscriber list grows. People eagerly open your email campaigns. You become an authority in your field. Sales go through the roof, and you retire happy and rich. Unfortunately, sometimes people are skeptical because they don't think of you as a content expert. Most people unsubscribe immediately after they download your gated content. Those who remain rarely open your emails, and when they do, they rarely click. On cold, dark nights, you shed a tear for all the time you wasted. So neither of these are techniques that I'm saying we shouldn't do. They absolutely are. But there's a range of different activities that you need to do in support of these techniques so that you can have that lasting relationship with your visitors and with your subscribers. So is there a better way? Yes. I call it the deep archive. So before we jump into what exactly this means, I want to take a look at a content type that is a little bit more straightforward and something that probably a lot of you have done before, and that's press releases. Press releases are kind of an interesting document, right? I mean, they're unlike any other type of marketing or content that you're going to produce, because they're so specifically targeted at a particular audience. You are trying to speak to journalists and people who are interested in news, and as a result, they're structured in a way where the content gets more and more detailed the deeper into it you go. There's a lot of repetition because the expectation is somebody who reads that opening line should kind of get the big picture on what you're talking about. Someone who only reads the first paragraph gets a slightly bigger picture, and etc. So I'll just walk through this, kind of breaking it down, what this press release is doing. So the heading introduces the news topic, and the subheading elaborates by gesturing at the impact that this news has. The introductory paragraph reiterates and expands on the heading and subheading. Again, you can see this just mirroring down the piece. The quote reaffirms the themes in the intro, strengthens the claim, and capitalizes on the authority of a speaker. The post-quote paragraph goes into greater detail, clearly delineating market impact and technological advancement. The conclusion points towards long-term brand goals. The boilerplate explains brand structure and positioning, and then a link directs interested parties back to the main website. So if you look at this, what you can do is you can create what I call engagement bands. You can break this up into buckets of content that are directed at different types of readers, or rather readers with different levels of engagement interest. And it's progressive. It moves down so that it allows whoever's reading this to sort of self-select the amount of information that they want. If this is a journalist who's just trying to survey what's going on in technology and they aren't really very interested in, Rubbermaid's mechanical pencils, then they'll just quickly read the heading and the subheading. If it's somebody who's planning on writing about this new innovation, they're gonna click on the link at the bottom because they want to go to the place where all of your information is, and that's your website. We can learn an important lesson from the way that press releases are built and structured. Because you can do the exact same thing, you can create those exact same content engagement bands with your typical types of content marketing. So, for example, we've got, in the types of content that are really low engagement, meaning you don't have to be super committed to moving through that content. You can engage with it very quickly. It's something that's good for newcomers. Things like a tip of the day, or your social media posts, listicles, best of compilations, link bait, viral videos, infographics, comparison posts, and quizzes. Again, all things that are really easy to read, really easy to engage with, probably very shareable, things that probably will tend to perform well on social media. But we all know that you can't just end there. So we got to layer down. We've got your newsletters, your searcher-focused blog posts, short-form articles, FAQs, opinion pieces, how-to videos, resource sections. And also, before I go on, this is all, depending on your industry and how you create this content, all of these things can be shifted around in the buckets, but this is just sort of my abstraction of some of the ways that we can think about these different levels of engagement. So then a layer below that, you've got long-form articles, something maybe that takes 10, 15 minutes to read on Medium, or thought leadership, ebooks, guides, educational archives, or webinars. And then that deepest, most engaged content marketing type, you're going to have market analysis, white papers, open source data sets, research studies, or conference presentations. Because after all, you have to fly here to come talk to me. So that's a pretty engaged type of content marketing. So one of the things that you can do when you have a sense for all of these different types of content is you can think about them in relationship to each other. That's something that we'll often do with one or two different kinds of content, but very, very rarely do we think about it in this sort of networked sense. So again, this is all just an abstraction. This is kind of a theoretical map that you can make of the different types of content and then the ways that you can link between them so that you create this very, a smooth gradient from one content engagement band to another, because the ideal thing that you're trying to do is you want to make it as easy as possible for somebody who wants a lot of deep engagement to be able to move. If they come in through a listicle, you want them to be able to find their way to that deep content as easily as possible, because the deeper they go into your content, the more indelible the brand impression will be. If I only read a couple of tweets, that's not going to make me transform the way that I view your company. But if I read a couple of ebooks and I sit down with your content and I spend a few hours on that, or if I go through your market research and it changes the way that I view the industry that I work in, I'm going to have a much stronger relationship to you, which you can then later leverage into sales and continued relationships. So again, what you're trying to do is you're by interlinking like this, you're trying to encourage users to reach their maximum engagement depth. So one of the things that you have to do in order to do that is you have to know who you're talking to. So personas, reader personas, user personas are really, really important for this. The other benefit is, and I'll get to this more later, but it also, knowing who you're talking to also makes writing the content a lot easier. If you have somebody in mind who has a problem and who has a need and a style that they're looking for, if you have that in mind when you sit down to write, it's going to be so much easier, I promise. So the topic that, let's say that you're me and your job is to write a large archive of content about how to write and design a website. So I'm going to sit down and say, okay, who am I talking to? Who are the people that I'm trying to target for this? So I created 3 different reader personas for this project. The first one is Kate, the small business owner. So she's, as a small business owner, she is the engine, the economic engine of what happens with her business. So her time is really valuable, and she has to be selling, she has to be engaging with customers. She doesn't really have a lot of time to do, go to business school in the evenings. She needs to be working. So She doesn't have a marketing background. She's always busy putting out fires. She's practical, industrious, and ambitious. She tends to consume articles online when she has a problem and she needs an answer quickly. So this is somebody who's kind of solutions oriented. She wants the answer. She needs to go find the best piece of information, consume it, and then move on to the next thing. So she's what I would call a low engagement reader. Alex, on the other hand, Alex is a marketer. His job is to create good content. So he's going to be much more invested in a sort of long-term skills building process. So he works at a medium-sized company. He has 5 years of experience. It's often really helpful to get pretty granular when you're talking about your personas because, again, the more detail you have, if I just said, well, persona number 2 is a marketer, that doesn't really tell us as much about what his motivations are and who what he needs from us. So we get a little detailed here. So he has 5 years of experience. He's looking for best practices to help refine his skills. He wants to experiment to find the most effective approach. He's somebody who's going to be willing to iterate. He wants to find that best next step. And he tends to consume content more slowly, bookmarking it and returning when he has time for self-learning. So that's going to be a very different relationship than what you're going to have with Kate, who is more looking for something like a listicle or a quick tip that can fall into her email inbox once a week, once a month, that sort of thing. Our third reader persona is Janelle. She's a founder. She's a startup founder. This is somebody who wants to know the deep inner workings of everything because she has to make the decisions. She can't just go off of, oh, well, I read a 4-point listicle, so let's head in this direction for the business. She needs that deeper underlying strategy, and so she's going to be willing to dig more, to spend more energy because her job really requires that level of engagement. So she comes from a business background, but she doesn't have any experience with content. She needs to sign off on the new website. She's going to be making the calls, yes, no. So that strategic level is going to be really important. She respects and appreciates full and long-form content, and she's willing to read long pieces in a single sitting. So again, this is somebody who's really there to engage with the content in a much deeper way. So she's a high engagement reader. So you can take that same network and you can think about how these different reader personas are going to engage with the content that you've created, and specifically how they're going to move through the network to find their deepest point of engagement. So Kate, she comes in because she saw a piece of link bait, she clicked on it on Facebook, and then she ended up on your site. And then from there, she took a look at some of your comparison posts, and maybe she went to a listicle, or maybe she watched a video that you've put out, or she, if she's got a little bit of extra time at the end of her day, maybe she reads a long-form article that your company has put out, or an opinion piece. But she's really probably not going to go too much deeper than that. She's got too much else to do to spend time digging around too meticulously. Alex, on the other hand, he's going to stay more in the educational area. He's not really particularly, maybe he'll follow you on social media, but that's not going to be his primary engagement point. He wants to get into, he wants to take a look at your FAQs. He wants to look at maybe, some white papers that you've put out, or a guide, or, maybe he'll even read an ebook or two if you really kind of justify to him that his time is being spent wisely. And again, he's going to, you're hoping that he's going to bookmark you and use you as a recurring resource throughout his career, or recommend your website to the next person who comes on board on his team that he has to train up. Janelle, on the other hand, she's going deep. She has no patience for, she doesn't like social media. She doesn't want to deal with the tip of the day. She wants deep information because she has to make the tough calls. So maybe she comes in through an opinion piece on Medium, and then she looks at some long-form articles, and then she goes into your educational archive, and from there she sees that you've got some market analysis that she'd like to check out. Maybe she comes to a conference. And so she's going to go much deeper into it. But the good thing is that she's also probably the decision maker. So if you create a place for her to go so that she dives deeply into your content, you're going to have a much higher likelihood of getting that immediate yes from the person who says, you know what, we got to go check out, fill in the blank. So far, this has been, I've been kind of mapping out a pretty big network, right? I mean, I bet a lot of you are looking at this and going, I don't have time to produce all of this stuff. The point isn't necessarily to build all of this. It's important to think about your content on a piece-by-piece basis. That's totally crucial. But it's also important to think about how your content fits together and what the pathways are that people will take as they move from one area to another so that they can find their ideal depth and which will give you the opportunity to maximize that relationship that the content marketing has an opportunity to build. So whereas I think that, I think a lot of marketers are often motivated by our bosses. We have our bosses say, I expect you to produce X number of blog posts in a week, or they say, oh, I want us to have Y number of ebooks in a quarter. This is what we're expecting. So we often end up thinking about things in this sort of sequential way, where we say, okay, what's the number one SEO term for this particular topic? And then you create a list of blogs and you slot them into into your content calendar, and you start churning away. And that's absolutely crucial. I mean, being methodical about it and having a sense of time is important. But the problem is, by the time you get to the 5th blog here, maybe the first blog isn't so relevant anymore, and you spent 2 days to 2 weeks going through and creating this content, researching it, getting it ready, and that's a really big waste. And if you don't think about how the first piece relates to the 5th piece, then any efforts that you go to, and we got to recognize, creating really valuable, educational, interventionist content, it takes time, it's expensive. We do it because Google AdWords are more expensive, but that doesn't mean that content marketing is, an easy game. You have to really think about how to maximize your effort so that it builds, as opposed to it just being one disposable piece after another until the end of time. Taking a step back from this horizontal thinking and starting to think more vertically is going to result in the same amount of content, but it's going to be more deeply integrated, and it's going to turn into an archive as opposed to sort of an endless blog roll. Let's say you do some SEO research and you realize there's a lot of volume out there for a piece about 4 ways testimonials can increase conversions. And so you sit down, you do some research, and you write your listicle. You got 4 topics on that. And then what's the next thing you do? The next thing I would argue you should do is take a look at those 4 points and then write independent pieces that discuss those things in greater depth, so that if somebody comes in and they find that the first piece, the first listicle item, which is about using testimonials as click triggers, then you can talk about different strategies of doing that, different ways of looking at it, different companies that have done good jobs with that. And you can create a post of your own that's specifically about that, so that if somebody reads point number 1, and they go, oh my God, I haven't been using any click triggers. Let me take a look at what else they have to say. They stay inside of your ecosystem of content. And you can keep doing this with all 4 of those topics. So by writing one single piece, you've actually planned out 4 additional pieces, which makes it a lot easier for you because you've started doing the research already, and you know where to go with it, and you have a sense for how it fits into the rest of your content. If using testimonials in your email campaigns, if you publish that in 6 months, and you link back to the piece that you originally wrote, 4 ways testimonials can increase conversions, then people are going to still get value out of that older content. Whereas if you don't have those connections, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to publish the post, and then 6 months later, it's buried so deep in your blog that no one will ever see it again. The other thing that you can do, you can even go deeper than that. So this top level piece, low engagement, 4 tips, maybe 500 words. The second layer here, that's gonna, maybe you write 1,000 words about each of those, and so you go into much greater depth. So somebody has to be more interested to get into that. Well, maybe you realize, wow, I've gotten a lot of really great. I'm thinking a lot about testimonials. So, maybe I should write a piece that's a little bit, a half step off from my main topic, but it's still supportive to the rest of this stuff. And then you go, wait a minute, I've got all of the information here, and I've done all of the research. Why don't I just write an ebook? And then you can take that ebook and you can put it behind, you can gate that content, you can link to it from all of these other pieces, so that you're, again, directing people farther down the pipeline, instead of it just being endlessly churning out more and more content. And the nice thing is that you can do the exact same thing in the opposite direction. Let's say you've got an ebook that you've written, and then you take a look at the different sections of that and go, I can condense this and turn each of these into smaller articles that are going to be a little easier to read. I'll link to the ebook from them, so we'll have some connections there. And then you say, wait a minute, now I've got these 4 topics that are all about testimonials. Maybe I should write a listicle that will then drive people that are less engaged into a deeper level of my content. So it's a way that you can map out a plan, that you have one idea, and then that one idea turns into a mountain of content. You don't have to waste time staring at the blank page. You don't have to do as much research because you're not hopping from topic to topic to topic. And the benefit is you're conquering a particular subject, which increases your chances of viewing your site as being authoritative for this particular topic, which is going to increase your SEO rankings. So the idea is, if you're going to go to all of that work and you build it out in this way where you've got the clear links between one layer and another, what people can do is they can settle down into the level of content that they're most comfortable at. So Kate stays up here. Maybe she only reads your listicle, but you've created content for her. She sees your brand. She's happy, and then she moves on to something else. Alex, maybe he actually goes through all of these pieces. He's like, he's been tasked with leveraging the good testimonials that his company has collected. And so he wants to think of a bunch of different ways that he can use it. Janelle, on the other hand, maybe she jumps in and she's like, I want to get the authoritative, no holds barred account of how to do this sort of thing, so that when I say, yes, that's the right website, I know that I'm confident in the decisions that I've made. You can zoom back out and take, so we were looking at individual pieces. Now you can zoom back out and think about those exact same processes for the different types of content that you have. Again, I'm not suggesting that we ignore SEO. I'm not suggesting that listicles are bad. I'm suggesting that we need to think about how all of these different things operate so that really sticky, that really SEO optimized piece can then be the entryway into a much larger archive of content so that people can get lost. Think about Wikipedia. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a Wikipedia fanatic because I love that process of I've got some simple question that comes up in my daily life. Say 8 o'clock at night, I Google to see, I recognize this actor. What movie was he in? And I check out Wikipedia. And then over the course of the next 2 to 6 hours, I end up wandering from topic to topic until I'm at the mating habits of the panda bear. And that process is a really interesting. It feeds my hunter instinct. It allows me to pursue content that interests me. And as a result, that's why Wikipedia works. Wikipedia has amazing content, but it's also really carefully and lovingly interlinked so that nobody ever ends up at a dead end. Dead ends are not good for your content marketing. There should always be another step, whether that step is sign up for your product, purchase a t-shirt, reach out to one of your sales reps, or that next step can also be read another page, and another page, and another page, and another page. Because again, this is going to really increase that emotional relationship that your readers have to you as a company. And that, as we know as marketers, you can't pay for that. That is the special sauce that makes all of our jobs a lot easier. Well, thank you so much.